Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over some of my thoughts for the Monday Night Football Showdown Slate, the Seahawks versus the Vikings. Before we continue though, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, really appreciate it. We're getting pretty close to 3,000 subscribers. I want to thank you guys for all the support on this channel. I got quite a few new subscribers over the weekend. I really do appreciate all the support. I really appreciate all the comments people leave. I like interacting with you guys, the likes you guys leave, and then obviously subscribing. And you can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. And that's about it. So without further ado, I say we get right into the video. Pretty much gonna go down the list here and talk about each player that I find relevant on this slate. And then Dalvin Cook, he comes in as the most expensive guy on the slate, and it's deservedly so. The guy has been an absolute monster this season. He's been pretty much one of the safest plays week in, week out. Him and Michael Thomas. He has not had a bust game yet. Christian McCaffrey did have a bust game, so that's something Dalvin Cook has not done. Has he reached Christian McCaffrey's ceiling yet? No, but he has been very close, and he has been excellent this season. If we just take a quick stroll through the game log here, 16, 31, 15, 28, 30, 13, which was his worst game versus Philly, which has a great run defense. Then 29, 19, 27, 31, 29. The guy has been excellent. He has not killed you in any week so far this season. So let's talk about Dalvin Cook. He offers you volume, he offers you efficiency, and he offers you talent. That's something hard to get. It's hard to get all three of those things from one player. Usually you can get talent and you can get efficiency, or you can get volume. Maybe you get two of those three, but it's really hard to get all three. He's offering you 24.36 touches per game, which is third most in the NFL. 133 total yards per game, which is second only behind Christian McCaffrey. And he's averaging nearly 25 Draftkings points per game, which is, again, second only behind Christian McCaffrey. And Minnesota is also third in rushing percentage, so obviously their main focus is to pound the rock with Dalvin Cook and then Alexander Mattison occasionally. And it's an okay matchup versus Seattle. Not like something I'm going out of my way to target, but it's not something I'm going out of my way to avoid either. They're 18th DVOA versus the run, and they're allowing 22.5 points per game to running backs, which is 11th fewest. So like I said, it's more middle of the road, but it's Dalvin Cook. He is going to be fine. And I have a hard time fading one of the best running backs in the NFL on a showdown slate, and he's game script proofed as well with his heavy involvement in the passing game when needed, or just in general. I mean, if you look at his targets per game, 6, 7, 7, 6, 2, 2, 6, 8, 5, 3, 2. He's a good pass catcher, and he can definitely do some damage through the air. And also, if you look at his recent games, it looks like he was kind of slowing down a little bit. If you look at his yards per carry, 3.4, 3.7, 2.4. Then before that, 4.3, 5.7, 2.6, and then 6.3, 2.5, 6.9, 7.7, 5.3. But that was after 11 weeks of playing football, 11 straight weeks. That's tough to do, especially when you're running back. He got the bye week last week. His legs should be pretty fresh here, so I think he's going to be feeling pretty good after this bye week, and I think he is ready to have a pretty solid game. So yes, Dalvin Cook, he's an excellent play. Do you have to captain him? No, you don't have to, but I definitely think he's a top candidate for your captain spot. No one really has the ceiling he does besides, like someone like Russell Wilson or maybe STEFON Diggs. But at the very least, you should probably get him into your flex spot. So yes, Dalvin Cook, I think he's an excellent play, and there's enough value to get him in your lineups tonight or tomorrow. Russell Wilson, he comes in at $1,000 cheaper, the second most expensive guy on the slate. And yes, of course, we're going to have interest in Russell Wilson. I gotta say though, 4 of his last 5 games have been a little crummy besides that Tampa Bay game. If you just look at his game log, 11 versus Philly, 17 versus San Francisco, 42 versus Tampa, although everyone kills Tampa. Most people kill Philadelphia too, and you only got 11. Then he had 15 versus Atlanta, 15 versus Baltimore. Then his last great game was versus Cleveland, where he had 28. But then he had 29 versus the Rams, 14 versus Arizona, because you just go figure, that's how fantasy works sometimes. But I will say the shine has wore off a little bit from Russell Wilson. Everyone had them as his top MVP candidate, midway to earlier in the season. I think Lamar Jackson has definitely overtook that, especially with this big win versus San Francisco that he just had it over 100 rushing yards again. But Russell Wilson, still obviously a great quarterback and great for fantasy. He offers you rushing upside as well. Not obviously nowhere even close to Lamar Jackson's rushing upside, but if he needs to scramble, he can definitely do so. And I definitely have plenty of interest in him here at home, where the Hawks typically play their best football, especially in prime time in front of the 12th man. They also grade out very well as a whole on offense in the passing game with explosive passes, and they're like top 5 in success rate in explosive passes. So the passing game is capable. Now they do like to run the ball a lot, but you don't want to run the ball too much on Minnesota. They're much easier to pass on. They're 4th DVA versus the run, but 16th versus the pass. So it's not awful, but it's much easier to pass on this defense. They're only allowing 18.8 points per game to quarterbacks, which is more middle of the road. But I do trust Russ more to make plays than I do the Minnesota defense and the washed version of Xavier Rhodes on defense to make plays and stop Russell Wilson. So I'm going to give the advantage to Russ here. I think he's going to be fine. He's definitely in play for your flex spot at the very least for a showdown slate. And also, we have a 15.5 point over-under on this game, so Vegas does expect some points to be scored. I think most of that comes off of the hands of Russ, so definitely got to like Russell Wilson here. You can put him in your captain spot. I don't mind that at all. He offers you 1,000 saving off of DALVIN Cook. Well, I guess in the captain spot, yeah, 1,000, same thing. So, yes, I definitely like Russell Wilson. STEFON Diggs, he comes at 9,800, and he's again, 1,000 cheaper than the next guy. And, well, we know for one thing for certain that's going to be big for STEFON Diggs, and that is that Stephon Thielen. Adam Thielen is out, which is nice to know. So we don't have to do any guesswork and just do assumptions. We know we have concrete evidence that he is going to be out for this game. And with him out, we definitely have to have interest in STEFON Diggs and give him bumps everywhere. Is he the most consistent guy in the world? No, but he does have big game upside, and he can blow a small slate like this wide open. But again, he's a little hit or miss, but 26 points versus Denver last week, 7 versus Dallas, 2 versus Kansas City, 23 versus Washington, 24, 46, 7, 19, 4, 10, 5. So he can disappear, but he can also blow up. And without Adam Thielen, obviously that's going to make him a little bit safer as he's just going to get more targets just in general. The guy's a talented wide receiver as well. And it's a pretty solid matchup versus Seattle. They're allowing 37.1 points per game to wide receivers, which is 13th most in the NFL. 14th DVOA versus the pass isn't like too incredibly exciting, but still the secondary isn't great. STEFON Diggs has monster upside, and if you believe the Seahawks get a lead, you could just imagine that the Vikings are going to throw the ball quite a bit. Not too much. They're not going to want to run the ball too much. I really don't think this game gets out of hand, but if you want to go that route, I think STEFON Diggs could push for double-digit targets here. Not saying it's likely, but he could push for it, maybe more like 7 to 9. But I do think he's an excellent play at 9,800, especially with no Adam Thielen. So, yes, I like STEFON Diggs. Tyler Lockett at 9,600, only, 200 cheaper than STEFON Diggs. So, I'd much rather play STEFON Diggs than I would Tyler Lockett. But I do think he's a fine play. But the last 2 weeks have been pretty gross, 4.8 points and 5.9 points. But before that, he was incredibly consistent. 43, 19, 16, 12, 14, 9, 35, 17, 11. Really didn't have a bad game. I mean, Arizona was pretty gross at 9.1, but after that, he was incredible. He was awesome. But then the last 2 games, 5.9 and 4.8. He also matched his week 1 performance last week when he had 2 targets for 1 catch, and that's what he did week 1, where he had 2 targets for 1 catch, although week 1 he turned that into a 44-yard touchdown. Last week was not the case, just a lone 38-yard catch. I will say he also runs mainly out of the slot, so he will avoid Xavier Rhodes since he's only traveled into the slot 3% of the snaps this year. But it really doesn't matter. Rhodes is no longer a person to avoid these days, so I really wouldn't care either way. I just wanted to point that out if you were wondering about Xavier Rhodes, where he would be lined up on. I'd assume he's going to be on DK Metcalf for the majority of this game. In general, though, Minnesota has been pretty awful versus wide receivers. They're allowing 42.1 points per game to them, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. I will say Tyler Lockett is your safer option over DK Metcalf, but that's also baked into his price at 9,600. But I definitely have interest in him. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to afford him in my lineups because I'm going to prioritize guys like Russell Wilson, Dalvin Cook, STEFON Diggs over Tyler Lockett. So it would be an interesting GPP option if you're building multiple lineups. But I got to say, I might have a hard time fitting him in. But don't make that sound like I don't like him. I think he's going to be solid, especially versus Minnesota. It's just he falls into a weird price range because I'd prefer Diggs and I'd prefer Cousins. And I'm not sure if I'm really going to be able to afford someone like Tyler Lockett if I'm going to play guys like Dalvin Cook, Russell Wilson. But we will see. But Kirk Cousins, he comes in at 9K, and I do think he's an excellent play. Captain Kirk, he's been pretty darn good after the awful start he had to the season when Vikings fans were calling for his head. He's been good. 26 points, 19, 21, 11 versus Washington was gross, but 32, 31, 23. Then beginning of the season, 8, 12, 11, 14. Pretty bad. But he has definitely turned it up. He's also going down the field as well. He's not just thinking and dunking. He's got the 3rd highest yards per attempt this season. He's got 21 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And also, Seattle is one of the worst teams at generating pressure right now on the quarterback, ranking bottom 5 in pressure rates. This is also a solid matchup, too. We liked using quarterbacks versus Seattle all season. They're giving up slightly over 20 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 11th most in the NFL. Kirk Cousins, 9K. He's not overly expensive, and I do think he's going to be extremely popular, and I think he's someone you probably want to get into your flex spot. You could be different and captain him. I really don't see myself wanting to captain Kirk Cousins, because I'd much rather play like DALVIN Cook or STEFON Diggs, one of his pass catchers, or just the main running back in the captain spot. But I do think Kirk Cousins is a pretty good, solid flex spot guy. I think he's going to throw a couple of touchdowns. Wouldn't surprise me if he got 250 yards, maybe upside of more if they're trailing in this game. Got to throw the ball quite a bit. So yes, Kirk Cousins is a pretty good play. But the first guy that gives me some caution here is Chris Carson at 8,400. So he worries me. He worries me a lot. He fumbled last week 2 plays in a row, which we know Chris Carson has some fumbling issues. Then Rashad Penny came in and balled out for over 100 yards, broke off that really nice long touchdown. And he was playing as Chris Carson was playing more of a second option to him, later in the game. He only had 8 carries in this game. I really can't see them not getting Penny involved, especially after what he showed he could do to the coaching staff last week. So I don't think they're just going to kick him to the curb and say, here, Chris Carson, have 30 touches in this game. I think it's going to be more likely of a split, and I really don't want to pay 8,400 for someone with uncertainty. So I don't really know what I'm going to get out of Chris Carson in this game. And also, we know if Carson fumbles, he could be banished into the shadow realm in this game, and we might never hear from him again. So that is a concern. Now, he is evolving a little bit in the passing game, so if he's going to get you, say his rushing attempts get cut a little bit, maybe he sees only like 10 to 12, he's still been involved in the passing game, which gives him a little bit of a safer floor, but he's also 8,400. That's hard to pay for someone that I'm not sure what they're going to do in the backfield. If they're just going to ride the hot hand, and Chris Carson isn't getting anything going, and he fumbles, I feel like he's just going to be dead. And then Rashad Penny's going to come in and not ball out, but at least be solid. And he's much cheaper as well. So Chris Carson, it's looking a little iffy here, especially because I'd rather use the passing attack on Seattle, because this defense is very good versus the run, ranking 4th DVOA. So Chris Carson, this is probably a stay away situation for me, but we can see how it plays out. I really don't think it's going to be necessary to get one of these running backs in like single entries, because I don't really see a lot of people going to either one, and it's really just a guessing game. You're going to hope you get the guy who gets the hot hand. If you're putting a whole bunch of lineups, maybe you could split your exposure to them, but for just single entry lineups, Chris Carson is on the outside looking in to make my lineup. Adam Thielen is out. DK Metcalf, he comes in at 7,600, so you get a nice discount on him over Tyler Lockett. Now, I wouldn't call this guy a boomer bust player because it really doesn't blank you any weeks, but he definitely has big play upside. But the floor isn't incredibly safe, but it's not too bad. I mean, you think of DK Metcalf, you think of someone that can be boomer bust, but he's actually been pretty solid. But his catch rate is considerably lower than Lockett, so that's why I'm kind of saying that he's not as safe play, but he definitely has a big play upside. If you look at his game log, 6.5, 12, 30, 16, 8, 11, 12, 1 versus Arizona. Yeah, that sucked. But then 8, 15, 12. He really isn't just boom or bust. He can give you just, 10 solid points almost every single week with upside of more. So I do think he's somewhat of a safe play, but obviously not the safest play in the world. Now, he will see a good deal of Xavier Rhodes, but like I said, that is not something to be concerned of these days. PFF has Rhodes graded out as a bottom 9 corner in the NFL right now on just the matchup chart this week. In general, Minnesota, like I said, been very bad versus wide receivers, third most in the league points allowed. I think he's a great mid-range to cheaper option to pair with Russell Wilson, and he can definitely hook up on some deep balls, and if he hooks up on a couple of deep balls, he's going to break the slate here, and if you don't have him, you are probably not going to take down a GPP. Now, am I saying he's most definitely going to hit on a couple of deep balls? No, but that's why you got to take some chances on a guy with DK Metcalf, maybe a couple of lineups, get that connection, and hopefully they hit on some long balls. He's getting about 16.6 yards per reception right now, and like I said, if they can burn Xavier Rhodes, maybe he catches a long touchdown. So DK Metcalf, I do think he's solid. Really not a boom or bust guy. Does he have a lower floor than Tyler Lockett? Usually. Tyler Lockett didn't have a great game the past 2 weeks in a row. But I do think DK Metcalf is a pretty solid option versus this Minnesota secondary. Kyle Rudolph, he comes in at 6,600. So the price has come up a lot on Kyle Rudolph, but I do think he's a solid play with no Thielen. I mean, his numbers with him out have been pretty good the past 3 weeks. He had 17 points on 5 targets, 19 points on 5 targets, and 11 points on 5 targets. So I think it's a safe assumption we could probably put him down for about 5 targets. Not too bad for someone like Kyle Rudolph. And he's going to see some red zone targets as well. In the past 3 weeks, he has 1 touchdown, 2 touchdown, 1 touchdown. not too bad. 4 touchdowns the past 3 weeks for Kyle Rudolph, seeing the red zone targets. This is a very good matchup versus Seattle. They're allowing 16.2 points per game to tight ends, which is 4th most in the NFL. So I do think Kyle Rudolph is a decent mid-range option here at 6,600. Do I wish he was a little bit less expensive? Obviously, but I do think there's a decent shot he can find the end zone and continue that touchdown streak that he has had. Obviously, you can't play these 2 quarterbacks, but Rashad Penny, he comes in at 5,400. And again, this is a situation I'm more than likely going to avoid. Minnesota is great versus the run, and this could be a hot hand backfield right now. And his explosive game last week was encouraging, but it's not something I'm going to bank on every single week. I mean, it was great versus Philadelphia, one of the tougher run defenses in the league, but he is a lot cheaper than Chris Carson. And if they're going to see similar work, I guess it would make more sense to play Rashad Penny. Is he going to be involved in the passing game much? Probably not. So that's going to be lacking, but he might get you a cheap touchdown, and if Chris Carson fumbles, it's definitely going to be more than likely the Penny show. So I'm on the side of caution for these 2 guys, but if you have a strong feel on, I want to play one of the Seattle running backs, and you have a lean towards Penny or Carson, I say go for it, but it's not something I'm personally going to go out of my way to get one of these guys in on a single entry lineup. So err with the side of caution on those 2. Hollister here, he comes in at 4,800. He's actually been pretty darn involved once Disley went out for the year. 4 targets last week, 4 points. For San Francisco, 10 targets, 20 points. Versus Tampa, 6 targets, 19 points. Then you had a couple of these bad games, but not too bad. He's only 4,800, which it's not super expensive, but it's not dirt cheap either. And honestly, I think he's going to have to get you a touchdown to pay off here. And he's going up against Minnesota, obviously, and they've been okay versus tight ends. Not great, not bad. More middle of the pack. They're allowing 12 points per game. He's going to be the number 1 tight end for Russell Wilson. But 4,800, if he doesn't get into the end zone, I think you're going to be more likely disappointed. You're probably going to see something like you saw last week where he had 22 yards. Probably going to be that 22 to 50-yard range. And there's a chance he gets a touchdown. There's a chance he doesn't. I think he's okay, but not something I'm super in love with on this slate. If you have 4,800 left and you want to plug in Jacob Hollister, I don't think that's terrible. Josh Gordon, he's 4,400. Now, he'll probably get ownership just on his name value alone and his price, but there's really not a lot of upside here at all. Lockett and Metcalf are the guys here, and Hollister is involved in well, and this team wants to run more than they want to pass the ball. So Josh Gordon's really just fighting for some target share here. He only played 34% of the snaps last week, and he received 2 targets, which matched his first week's total with Russell Wilson. It is a good matchup versus Minnesota, and if you're building multiple lineups, you can hope he makes a splash play and finds the end zone, but that's really just what you're banking on. The targets really aren't going to be there too much, and you're just banking on a big play from Josh Gordon and hope he gets into the end zone. So Josh Gordon, really not like a core play for me on this slate. The kickers, they are what they are. If they hit their field goals, they become excellent value plays. Dan Bailey, I probably prefer Jason Myers just because I think the Seahawks are going to put up more points. But, both kickers are fine. And whoever hits their field goals, and they become good value plays. Just go with whatever side you want. Irv Smith, he comes in at 3,600. I actually think he's an okay play here. A decent price at 3,600. And with no Thielen, he becomes in play at this price, and I expect Minnesota to continue to run some 2 tight end sets here a lot. And just looking at his game log since week 7, it's not too bad. So 11 points versus Denver, 8 versus Dallas, 6 targets in that game as well. 6 targets versus Kansas City, had 7.3 points, 5.1 versus Washington on 3 targets, then versus Detroit, 6 targets again, 11 fantasy points. He's more athletic than Kyle Rudolph, but Kyle Rudolph's really been getting those red zone targets. But he did score it last week, and I think Irv Smith is an okay play at 3,600. This is a good matchup. Again, Seattle's allowing 16 points per game to tight ends. I think both he and Kyle Rudolph could both have good games. Irv Smith, a little bit, actually not a little bit, a lot of bit cheaper, about half the price of Kyle Rudolph, almost 3,000 cheaper. So I do think he's a pretty solid value option at 3,600. Upside is definitely there. And then the Vikings defense and Seattle defense, I'm not interested in really either. We have a 50.5 point over-under. But I guess if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Seahawks, I think, because they are at home playing in front of that 12th man in prime time. And, Kirk Cousins does have a history of sucking in prime time. Not saying he's going to suck in this matchup. I think he's going to have a solid game. But, he does have a history there in the Seattle defense. It's not good, but they're also playing at home in prime time. So I think they might be okay. But I really am not going to go out of my way to target either defense. I think both offenses can put up points here. Olabisi Johnson, he's probably one of the best value plays on this slate. He comes in at 2,600. I expect him to be pretty high owned as well because he's very cheap. And Adam Thielen's out, and he's coming off a 9-target game versus Denver. We only had 9 fantasy points, but still, he's only 2,600. He really hasn't done much, but you can throw in Seattle, and this defense will be more concerned with Stefon Diggs, so he should see some softer coverage, and I assume they're going to be concerned with Kyle Rudolph a little bit too because he's been playing very well. And also, he has one less target than Diggs the past 3 weeks, which is kind of crazy to think about. And the volume is there, but obviously not the elite upside of someone like Stefon Diggs. He does not have like 30-point upside like Stefon Diggs does, but he doesn't have to because he's 2,600. And if he gets us 6 to 10 points, we will take it. If he gets to the end zone, I think he does a little bit better than that. So not too bad. He's about 7,000 cheaper than Stefon Diggs. So if you want to go with Olabisi Johnson, I definitely think he's a solid option. I do expect him to be pretty popular with no Adam Thielen. That's really the lowest I want to go. I'd only target Alexander Mattison if you think the Minnesota Vikings blow out an opponent, which I don't think they're going to blow out Seattle at all. So I honestly think they might be playing from behind. Not like a lot, but it's going to be a back and forth game. So I really don't think there's a reason Alexander Mattison would get a whole bunch of work. So I mean, I like him in games where you think the Vikings can blow a team out because then they're going to take DALVIN Cook out to preserve him, and then Madison can run the show for a little bit. But I don't really see that happening in this game. David Moore, just a rotational wide receiver, like 4 on the Seahawks at this point. Laquan Treadwell, no thank you. We did have a target last week, but I know that's really just about it. I don't really see anyone else that I would want to recommend. I know Malik Johnson, he caught that touchdown last week. I don't even see him on here. What is his price? Am I missing something? Or am I thinking of someone else? Who was the wide receiver for the Seahawks that caught that touchdown? Oh, no, it was Malik Turner, not Malik Johnson. Malik Turner. He caught that touchdown last week. He had 2 targets, 1 catch, 33-yard touchdown. It was a beautiful throw by Russell Wilson, one of his best throws I've seen all year. Just dropped it in the pocket and double coverage, but really have no interest in him. I mean, he's got to catch pretty much a touchdown at 2K. If he was like an 800 range, yeah, you could take a flyer on him, but at 2K, I mean, kind of banking on a little bit too much. I'd rather just play Olabisi Johnson or someone like Irv Smith. I really don't think it's necessary to go all the way down there. And really, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I have not tried to make a lineup yet, so I guess I can just try to make one on the fly. We could see how roster construction would look like. So let's say we want to captain someone like, I don't know, Russell Wilson. I feel like he would be a popular captain on this slate. But I probably want to get Dalvin Cook in. I'd like to get Kirk Cousins in the flex spot. And I don't know if we're going to be able to fit in Stefon Diggs. So let's get some value options first and see what opens up. I don't mind Olabisi Johnson here. He comes in at 2,600. I think you can get away with playing Irv Smith as well. So we got our pass catchers with Kirk Cousins. We have 6,800 left, and I know for sure so we can get someone. We can fit in someone like Kyle Rudolph. So I don't hate the start to that lineup. That's just... Hopefully no one just skips to the end of this video and sees what lineup I make because I just made this up on the fly, so this was not well thought out. But it's just the way you can go. So it's actually pretty easy to fit in someone like Russell Wilson. I keep wanting to say Russell Westbrook. Russell Wilson in the captain spot. So it's definitely doable, and I do think Russell Wilson is one of the top captain options. Also, Dalvin Cook, Stefon Diggs, Kirk Cousins, Tyler Lockett are all options as well. If you want to get really weird, you could run someone out like Kyle Rudolph in the captain spot. I hope he catches 2 touchdowns, but that's just something really off the wall. If you're playing a single lineup, I think Dalvin Cook, Russell Wilson, Stefon Diggs are probably where you should look to start in your captain spot. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If it was helpful, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. And I'll see you guys in the next video.